Hello, hello, hello. Happy Tuesday. How are y'all doing? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day. Today is Strategy Tuesday here on Nick at Noon. So, we are going to be going deep into strategy. Specifically, today, we're going to be talking about the sales conversation. Yes, we are going to be talking about the sales conversation because without it, do you really have a business? So, yes. Let me know if you can see me and hear me okay by dropping a yes in the comments. And we're just going to jump right into it. The thing about it is that most women hate selling. And it isn't because they're bad at it, it's because they've been taught to think about selling in the wrong way. So, the version of selling that feels gross and pushy and manipulative and completely at odds at who you are as a woman, I'm here to tell you right now, today, right at the beginning of this episode, that that isn't selling. That is pressure, and pressure and selling are not the same thing. The version of selling that feels natural and honest and completely aligned with who you are, that is a conversation. But it's a specific kind of conversation. It's the kind of conversation that most women are already equipped to have. They just don't know that they're allowed to call that conversation selling. Welcome back to another episode of Nick at Noon. My name is Nick Scott, and I'm the founder and CEO of Her Income Edit. We are an online education platform where we help professional women turn their existing skills into multiple streams of income through coaching offers and digital products without leaving their 9 to 5, without burnout, without the hustle, and without starting from scratch. Happy Tuesday. Thanks so much for joining. It is Strategy Tuesday. And before we jump into the content of today's episode, I want to mention real quick that I'm hosting a live workshop on May 30th. It is called Her Income Lab. And we're going to be building your coaching offer together in real time. So get on the wait list if you haven't already. The link for the wait list is down in the description, or you can visit my website at herincomeedit.com/workshop. Now, I invite you on this Strategy Tuesday because we're going to be getting into it. If you haven't already, go get your notebook and your pen or whatever it is that you take notes on. Share this episode with your biz bestie or with someone who needs it. And if you have any questions or comments as I'm going through the content, I'm going to invite you to drop them in the chat if you're watching live, or you can leave your questions in the comments if you're watching the replay, and I will get to them at the appropriate time because we are about to get into it today. We're talking about how to have a sales conversation without feeling like you're selling. So, before I talk about what a great sales conversation looks like, I want to spend some time on why so many new coaches and so many women resist having sales conversations in the first place, because I think the resistance isn't random. I believe that this resistance is specific and it's rooted in something real. So, the first reason I believe that women and new coaches resist selling is that we've been conditioned to equate selling with inauthenticity. And every manipulative sales experience you've ever had, just think about it for a minute. Like, literally close your eyes and think about the manipulative sales experiences that you've had over the course of your life. Maybe it was the high pressure car dealership. Maybe it was a pushy insurance rep. Maybe it was a network marketer who turned every single conversation into a sales pitch. Because the thing about any of those that I just described or any others that you're currently imagining in your mind's eye, all of those experiences have left a sticky residue on you and on your spirit. And that residue, it created a belief. That residue created a belief that selling is something you do to people, not for them, right? So it feels like when you're going into a sales situation, that something is being done to you, not for you. So when it's time for you to make an offer for your coaching, that belief, that's the stickiness of that residue, it shows up because you don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person, right? You don't want to be someone who makes somebody else feel uncomfortable. You don't want to damage a relationship for the sake of a transaction. And that's completely normal. I mean, let's be honest. If you did want to make somebody feel uncomfortable by being pushy and salesy and, all of those things, if you did want to damage a relationship for the sake of a transaction, um, I think that we all would have some bigger problems that we need to talk about. Because that right there is not what sales is. And because you don't want to make people uncomfortable and because you don't want to the potential of damaging a relationship for the sake of a transaction, you don't make the offer. And the thing about it is the potential client who needed exactly what you have to offer, that person walks away without knowing that it was even available. So that is the first reason why I believe that women and new coaches resist selling is because we've all been conditioned to equate selling with inauthenticity. And we have all had those high pressure sales experiences that have left that sticky residue. And when we enter into a sales situation, um, that belief, it just resurfaces. Every single time I walk into like Sam's Club or Costco and that person is standing at the front trying to sell me T-Mobile or something for my lawn or whatever the thing is, my initial reaction is no. Like, I don't even want to be bothered, right? So, the second reason that women resist selling is that they've confused selling with asking for permission to have value. And here's what I mean, because this one is subtle, but it's everywhere, y'all. When you make an offer and you're afraid to hear no, what you're often afraid of isn't the rejection of the offer. Now, I want you to stay with me and follow me with this one. What you're afraid of is the rejection of you. You're afraid of your judgment about what it is that you know. Or you're afraid of your assessment that what you have is worth the price that you're asking for it. So hearing no doesn't just feel like a commercial transaction that didn't work out. It feels like someone looked at everything you've built and they judged it and then they said that's not enough. But that's not what hearing no means. Hearing no in the context of a sales conversation when you're offering your services to help someone, hearing no is information. Hearing no means not right now. It means it's not the right fit. It means it's not the right time. Hearing no is information, it is not a verdict. And selling from the place that truly understands the distinction between those two, between information and a verdict, that distinction feels completely different than selling from a place that really doesn't fully understand that distinction, right? Would you agree with that? And the third reason that women resist selling is that they've been taught that building an audience is a prerequisite for making offers. And we talk about this a lot here on my channel. We've talked about it before on Nick at Noon. And that belief that you need a following before you're allowed to sell, yeah, that simply isn't true. And we've talked about the belief that you need to earn the right to ask through months of free content before anyone will even pay attention. But here's what that belief produces: it produces coaches who have been creating content for 6 months and haven't made a single direct offer. If you believe that you have to build an audience before you have permission to sell in this space, in this online space, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about a coaching program, it doesn't matter if we're talking about a digital product. If you believe that you have to build an audience before you're allowed to sell, that belief produces very specific things. It produces coaches who have been creating content for 6 months and they haven't made a single offer. It produces a whole generation of coaches who have built a platform, but they haven't built a business. So the belief that you need to build an audience before you sell, it produces a whole generation of coaches who are waiting for the audience to get big enough that the selling feels less vulnerable. And the thing about it is the audience never gets big enough to make the selling feel safe because the safety doesn't come from the size of your audience. The safety in the quote unquote safety in selling, it comes from the belief that what you're offering is genuinely worth paying for. And that belief, that is built through offers. It is not built through followers. Because the fact of the matter is, your 9 to 5 was never meant to be your only income stream, but your skills sitting behind a platform that never makes an offer, that's not generating income either. Your offer is the bridge between all of that. And your offer, it happens in a conversation. There's no other way for it to happen. Now, I want to take a minute and redefine what I believe a sales conversation is. Because I think the word sales has been so thoroughly contaminated by the pushy, by the pressure filled version, that it's worth scrapping that old definition altogether and creating a new one. And that's what I'm going to do here today. A sales conversation is a conversation between two people where one person has a problem and the other person has the potential to solve it. So, did you hear that definition? I'm going to say it again in case you're taking notes. A sales conversation is a conversation that happens between two people where one person has a problem and the other person has the potential to solve that problem. Now, I want you to hear it because there was no manipulation in that definition. There was no pressure. There is no one doing something to somebody, right? That definition literally is just two human beings having an honest dialogue about whether working together makes sense. And here's what makes That definition of a sales conversation, here's what makes selling feel more like a service and less like selling. And it's the orientation of that conversation. Somebody drop orientation in the comments. A sales conversation that is oriented around closing, it feels like pressure. So if you're going into your sales conversation and all you're thinking about is closing the sale, that feels like pressure. That conversation feels like pressure because the goal is to get a yes from the person before that person has even had a chance to think too hard about it. And that type of orientation that's oriented around closing, it uses urgency, it uses scarcity, it uses social proof to create a momentum toward a yes that it overrides your client's own judgment. You're not doing a service for your client when you have a sales conversation that's oriented around pressure. And even when this type of sales conversation works, it produces the wrong kind of client. It produces the kind of client who is talked into something rather than given something that they're aligned with. Okay. So then what kind of sales conversation should I be having if I'm not, going into this conversation that I need to close this sale? I want you to approach your sales conversations with the orientation and with the mindsets of fit. Because when you think about it through the lens of fit and when you approach your conversations through the lens of fit, it feels like a service because the goal of that particular sales conversation is oriented around fit and clarity. And that clarity isn't just for you, but it's for your potential client too. Because by the end of a conversation that is oriented around fit, both you and the prospective client should clearly understand whether working together makes sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, a conversation that is oriented around fit, it will say so. Because take it from me, a misaligned client is worse for your business than no client at all. And here's what I've learned about women in sales conversations. The ones who are the most afraid of selling, they're often the ones who are most naturally suited to a fit oriented conversation. If you are afraid of selling, I encourage you to take a different approach and approach your conversations around fit and not pressure or closing the sale. Because the skills that make a great coach, the skills of curiosity and deep listening, and the ability to ask the right questions that open up your clients, those are the same skills that make a great sales conversation. And the truth is, you've been having fit oriented conversations your entire life. Do you believe that? You've been having fit oriented conversations, sales conversations your whole life. You've been having them with colleagues. You've been having them with direct reports. You've been having them with clients in your professional role. You've been having them with anyone you've helped navigate a complex situation. You already know how to listen. You know how to ask the right questions. You know how to understand what someone needs before you offer the solution. And the sales conversations within the context of your coaching business, they're just that, with the addition of an offer at the end. We cannot skip that part, right? So now I want to spend some time on the specific shift that happens when you move from having a professional conversation to making an offer, because I think that this is where most coaches lose their footing. So the conversation is going well. You are listening. You are asking all the right questions. You are asking good questions. Your potential client, she's opening up about what she's struggling with, and you're recognizing the pattern, and you know you can help this person. Then it's time to make your offer. And then something in you shifts. The warmth of the conversation, it gives way to something that feels more transactional. The ease disappears, your voice starts changing, you become suddenly less certain of what it is that you want to say. And most coaches handle that discomfort by doing one of two things. They either rush through their offer just to get it over with, or they avoid even pitching their offer altogether. And then they end the conversation with a vague, I'll follow up with you later, instead of pitching their offer. And both of those responses are understandable. If that is you, please understand that you are not alone. I have been there, I have done that, and I have worked through it. But the fact is, just because it's understandable, both of those responses also cost you a client. And here's what's happening in that moment. You shifted from the zone where you feel competent, where you're listening, where you're asking, where you're understanding, and then you went to a zone where you felt exposed because you're naming your price, you're asking for a commitment, and you're holding space for a response without immediately filling the silence. And the way to stay grounded through that shift is to always, 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 always remember what your offer actually is. Because your offer is not a transaction. Your offer is an invitation. The literal definition of an offer is to invite. You are inviting someone. Your offer is an invitation to work together to solve the problem that your potential client just described to you. Your offer is an invitation. If excuse me, your offer is an invitation to that client so that they can access the skills that you've spent years building in service of a challenge that that client has been carrying. You see where I'm going with this? Somebody drop service in the comments. Your offer is an invitation to that client to stop navigating whatever this thing is by themselves and have someone in her corner who understands what she's dealing with. Now, when you make an offer from that frame, it doesn't feel like selling, does it? It feels like the natural conclusion of a conversation that was always pointing toward the question of whether or not you can help that person. And the answer is, if you're in this conversation, the answer is yes, you can help her. And here's what that looks like. Your 9 to 5 has trained you to be the person with the solution. It trained you to be the expert in the room. Your job trained you to be the one that people come to when they need something solved. And the crazy thing about all of that is the sales conversation that you have within the context of your coaching business, it is literally the same role. It is just taking those skills and applying those skills to someone who needs what you have, and then you offer it on your terms. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks so much for joining. I see the love on YouTube. I appreciate y'all. Now, let me call out the specific things that get in the way of a good sales conversation because the conversation itself is not the hard part. It is the internal experience of the conversation that makes it hard. So, the first thing that gets in the way is the belief that your potential client is doing you a favor by showing up and considering your offer. So, this one shows up in a sales conversation as over gratitude at the beginning of the conversation. So, you might say things like, "Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you meeting with me. I know you're busy." And all of that language, it sets the wrong dynamic before a single word has ever been spoken. It positions you as the supplicant and the potential client as the one with the power. And this dynamic is very hard to recover from once it is established because that power dynamic it produces great it produces a great sales conversation and it sets the stage as it's mutual because the thing about it is you have something valuable to offer and that potential client has a problem that needs to be solved. So this is a mutual beneficial situation. So the conversation is about whether or not those two things are a fit. Remember, we just talked about the fit oriented conversation. Somebody dropped fit in the comments, FIT. So neither of the parties are doing the other a favor. You're not doing her a favor. She's not doing you a favor. Both of you are trying to figure out something that matters to both of you, right? It's all about fit. So the second thing that gets in the way is this one. This one right here is crazy to me. And that is the fear of silence that comes after the offer. It I don't know if it's human nature for us to just, be aversive to silence. We play music in our cars. We have, background noise and white noise all the time. This is so common. When you state your price, you you state your price, you talk about what working with you would look like. And then when it's time to make the offer, you ask if she wants to move forward. What usually happens is a potential client, they don't immediately respond, right? They've sat through your whole conversation. If you have a presentation, you've listened, you've asked questions, they may have asked you some questions, and you get to the end of the conversation and you say, "Here's how much the thing costs." Most of the time, the client does not immediately respond. And most of the time, coaches will fill in that silence. They'll fill in that silence. They'll add a qualification. They'll offer a discount. Then they start explaining the price before the client even has had a chance to process it. These coaching packages are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of investment. Nobody makes an investment that costs them 4 and 5 figures without processing it, without thinking about it. And if you are the kind of coach that doesn't publicize her prices on a website or on their social media or anywhere where they can visibly see it, and the first time that they see it is when you present it to them in a sales conversation, it's only natural for that person to reflect and to process and to not say anything. I'm not a great negotiator, but I heard at some point in sales training over the course of my career that in a negotiation, The person who speaks first loses. So if you put your price up there and you say, this is the price, it's $10,000 to work with me one-on-one. Just be quiet and let them process it. Let them understand what the value is that you're bringing to the table. Let them start to picture themselves on the other side of the transformation. Don't explain the price before your client has had a chance to process it. Like, I know $10,000 might sound like a lot, but here's what you're getting. You already said what they're getting, because all of that communicates the same thing to the client. It says that you're not sure that your coaching is worth what you just said it is. I just said it's worth $10,000 to work with me one-on-one. The silence in that moment, it's not a no. The silence is a sign that she's thinking, and thinking is what you want. A client who thinks before she commits is 9 times out of 10 a client who is truly taking the time to make this decision. And a client who truly takes the time to make this decision, that is someone who fully shows up for the work, because they understand that this is an investment and not a transaction. So my advice to you, state your number, whatever the number is, it's going to be, if you're working with me, it's going to be $2,000 or more. So whatever the number is for you and your business, my advice to you when you get to that point to presenting your offer and stating your price, just let the silence hold. Just stop talking. And I don't want you to let the silence hold forever, but let it hold long enough for that client to have a response instead of a reaction to your discomfort with the silence. Does that make sense? Like, that right there to me is probably the best advice that I could give any new coach in this space. So let's talk about this third thing. The third thing that gets in the way is the misalignment between what you charge and what you believe your offer is worth. There's a lot of unlearning that has to happen in this space for a lot of reasons. For one, again, you're asking someone to pay multiple thousands of dollars, 4 and 5 figures to work with you for things that you have honed and developed over the course of your life or your career. That in itself requires a different mindset. Then the fact that you can literally make 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, $100,000 in 1 month when your entire annual salary is probably $100,000. That is another mindset shift that has to happen. So there's a lot of belief transformations and dismantling and rebuilding that has to happen when you enter into this space. And so the third thing that truly gets in the way of having these great sales conversation is that misalignment between what you charge and what you believe your offer is worth. And we have talked about this before, but I want to bring it up again because it shows up most visibly in your sales conversations. And if you don't believe that your price reflects the value, your client won't either. I spend a lot of time working with my clients, whether it's one-on-one or in my programs, about value versus price. And if you don't believe that your price reflects the value, your client won't believe it either. They can sense it. And it's not because your client is evaluating you critically, but it's because you're telling your client not to evaluate you critically. You're saying it through your hesitation and you're saying it through your justification. You say it through everything that happens in your voice and your body language when you say your number, but you haven't fully resolved your relationship with it yet. There's so many deep rooted psychological belief and mindset work that has to happen in this because your relationship with money, it will reveal itself when you start to launch your coaching business. And if you don't believe that you don't have or yes, I said that right. If you don't believe you have a relationship with money, trust me, as soon as you go to launch your coaching business, things will start to surface and you'll start to feel things that you've never felt before. So the sales conversation, honestly, y'all, it is not the place for you to work out your pricing question. Your pricing question should be resolved before you walk into your sales conversation so that by the time you're in the conversation, your price is just information. Like that's just what it is. It is factual, it is clear, it is said with the same certainty as everything else that you say in that conversation. Now, I want to talk about something that most people don't consider when they talk about sales conversations, and that is what the conversation produces beyond the immediate yes or no. I mean, of course, we want to hear yes, but we're going to hear no more times than we hear yes when we first start. And every sales conversation you have, regardless of you whether you get a yes or a no, it produces something valuable. So let's talk about a sales conversation that ends with a yes, because the obvious thing happens with that one, right? You get a client, you get immediate influx in revenue in your business. You have a relationship with a person that you get to build. You have a person whose results will become the evidence that your coaching works, right? So yes, it feels good. But when you have a no or a not right now, something less obvious happens. It's equally as good, but it's just less obvious. And that thing is you learn. You learn what objections come up that you need to address earlier in the conversation. You learn how the potential client describes her own problem and whether your language matches hers. You learn where the hesitation lives. Is it in the price? Is it in the timing? Is it the uncertainty about whether coaching is the right solution for her right now? And that information, it makes your next conversation sharper. It makes your next conversation easier. Every single sales conversation you have is a data point. And the coaches who build the fastest, they're not the ones who get the most yeses. They're the ones who use every single conversation, whether they get a yes or a no. They use those conversations to refine their understanding of who they're serving and how to serve them better. Somebody drops service in the comments. We are in the service industry. And here's what this means for the woman who's building a coaching business. Having sales conversations isn't just about getting clients. Having sales conversations isn't just about getting clients. It's about building the clarity, it's about building the language, and it's about building the confidence that makes your business sustainable. And here's the connection to the bigger picture. Your skills are your backup plan, they're your leverage, and they're your next stream of income. But skills that never make an offer to anyone, they're not generating anything. So the sales conversation is where your skills become income. And if you're taking notes, I want you to jot that down, but I want you to personalize it. I want you to write down my sales conversations are where my skills become income. It's not the platform, it's not the content, it is not your audience. It is the sales conversation. And every sales conversation you avoid is a conversation that could have moved the needle in your business. Now, if I haven't already, I want to say something else that I don't think gets said enough. And that is the women who need your coaching, they're not sitting around waiting for you to have the perfect pitch. Right now, they're sitting around dealing with the problem, and they will continue to deal with that problem until someone shows up who understands that problem well enough to offer them a solution. So your hesitation to have a sales conversation, it's not protecting them from a pushy experience. It's protecting you from the discomfort of making the offer. And let me be very honest in this because I've made, I don't know how many offers over the course of the years that I've been doing this. It gets easier. The first one is going to be it's going to be very uncomfortable. The very first sales conversation you have, it's going to be uncomfortable. The second one you have, it's probably going to be uncomfortable. The third one, maybe a little less uncomfortable. But by the time you've been doing this and you've been working that muscle, it just starts to be exactly what it is, a conversation, a dialogue. It becomes, the environment at which you start to understand whether or not the person on the other side of the Zoom call or on the other side of the table is actually a good fit for you to work with. So I understand you protecting yourself from the discomfort of making an offer. But the thing is, while you're protecting yourself from that discomfort, your prospective client is still stuck, and so are you. Like it literally does no one any good to not have a sales conversation. And here's what I really want you to understand about the conversation that you might be afraid to have. Your conversation, your sales conversations, it's not a performance. It's not a pitch. What it is it's a woman who has built skills. I'm talking about you. You have built skills and you're showing up for another woman who needs what you have to offer. Your sales conversation is a potential client and she's waiting for you to say it directly. She's waiting for you to say, I believe I can help you. Here's how I can help you. Here's what it costs. Do you want to work together? It's not pushy. That is the clearest form of service that I believe you can offer. And the potential client on the other side of that conversation, she deserves to hear that. She doesn't deserve to hear a vague, hinted at, never quite committed version of the conversation. Your potential client deserves to hear the direct version, the version that respects your potential client enough for you to be clear with her. Because you've spent years building the skills that give you the right, that give you the authority to have that version of the sales conversation. Your 9 to 5 has been the proof of that. Your experience is the evidence. The pattern recognition that you have, that is an asset. And the sales conversation is how you make all of that available to someone who needs it. So the only thing left for you to do really is to have the conversation, right? So before I close, I want to come back to something that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, and that is on May 30th, I am hosting her Income Lab. It is a live workshop where we will build your coaching offer together in real time. And here is why today's episode connects directly to that. So the confidence to have a great sales conversation, it starts with having a clear offer. Because when you know exactly who you help, what problem you solve, what working with you looks like, and what it costs, the conversation stops feeling like a pitch and it starts to feel like a solution. And a solution of something that you built with conviction is easy to deliver. So, Her Income Lab is where you build that offer. Registration isn't open yet, but the wait list is, and the women who are on the list are first when the doors open. The link for the Her Income Lab wait list is in the description, or you can visit my website at herincomeedit.com/workshop. And most new coaches hate selling because they've been taught to think about it the wrong way. If you haven't gotten anything else from this whole conversation, I hope that's what you were able to gather through this conversation. That most new coaches, they hate selling because they've been taught to think about it the wrong way. And it's natural. We talked about it, right? The thing about it is selling is not a transaction. It's a conversation. It's a relationship. It's a conversation between someone who has a problem and someone else who has a solution. And the clearest, most direct version of that conversation is the most respectful thing you can offer your clients. So please have the conversations. Have them not when you feel ready or after you've built a big enough audience or when you feel like your conditions are better. I encourage you to start having conversations today with the skills that you already have, with the offer that you're currently building, with people that are in your network who have been waiting for someone to show up and ask. Now, I want you to come back tomorrow. It is Money Wednesday. Thank you, thank you, thank you on YouTube. I see the love. It is Money Wednesday. I am here Monday through Friday at noon live on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how to raise your prices without losing your clients. So if you haven't already, I want you to hit the subscribe button on YouTube, turn your notifications on so you don't miss a beat, because we're going to be getting into it tomorrow. The wait list for Her Income Lab is open. The link is in the description, or you can go to my website at herincomeedit.com/workshop. Thank you to all of you who spent any amount of time with me on today's conversation, where we thoroughly talked about how to have a sales conversation without being pushy. Share this episode with a friend, and I will see y'all in the next one. Thank you. Bye.